in America. But then what we read in the writings of the great writers like V.S. Naipaul, how actually his forefathers, they went to the caravans as the worker of the coffee and the tea estate. And the alienation and the exile, the loss of identity, the pain and the agonies and the nostalgia and the memories of remembering one's root, because the very basis of their writing. And on the referendum day in Great Britain, there was a stellar gathering of the writers, when it was really an astonishing moment, when we find most of the Indians were gathered there. Usha Akila, Meena Alexander, then you Vikram Sheth, then you find all these writers, those who expressed their agonies of managing, monitoring, accepting, and in spite of a feeling of rejection when you embrace a different culture. This I found in the whole of the book, and I was simply marveled by the story. Yeah, Asim Sir was also telling, mothers from 2 states. This is a wonderful narrative. It's not a story. It is a depiction of a reality. Then when her mother and mother-in-law, one is vegetarian, the other is non-vegetarian. One speaks Odia, the other speaks Hindi. Where they stay, they speak English. This is almost like, I remember, Anita Desai's Blackbird at the time of going through this. When Sarah is a British lady and Sarah and her husband is in India. And when Sarah remains inside the house, she wears a sari. When her husband's mother comes to Britain, there she is compelled to wear a sari, though she is a British lady. When she goes out to the streets of London, she finds that she is a British woman. In a country where there are toilets, different toilets for the Asians, different toilets for the Britishers. When you read the whole gamut of literature of the world, today that has made a very special attention to the sensitive readers of the world, they find that this globalization has brought, no doubt, it has brought a kind of assimilation of the different cultures. Also, it has brought so many problems of accepting one culture and belonging to another culture. It's a problem. And it is the whole of the complex things that you find. That is why in most of the stories, I have learned so many words by reading this book. I did not know actually so many English words of the Odia things that are used in Odisha. She has worked on that because she is not from Odisha. And when you say this Ghuguni and Vada, she says just for the words. We should not go to the very thematic aspect of the parable. As Gerard Jennett said that when you are interpreting a story, don't go by the theme today, in the present context of the global literature, go by the very work of the writer to adopt a kind of language to give expression and exact objective expression to her very feelings and emotions. This is a very tough task. Thereby there lies the success of the story. There lies the success of your poetry, as what kind of language you use. Appropriate language for appropriate feelings, emotions and situations. That will mesmerize the reader. That will create a sense of meditative feeling of the reader to go through each word, not to go by the story. And stories in the world are as old as human civilization. And you know that till date, these fairy tales, the fables, the myths, all these have been the very literal and commercial basis of the modern world. Disney adopted the Cinderella and the Snow White, and so many series have been also done. Those imaginary works, because whenever you are writing, a writing can be judged for what? From the very power of imagination, not the power of dealing with the subject of a person, but how far your imagination is so genuine. It is your imagination. When your imagination is yours, the words becomes yours. And thereby, a work of art reaches and crosses the borders. It touches the millions, not one or two or a person. It doesn't go for an award. Like you know that, Jean-Paul Sartre. When he was given Nobel Prize in 1962, he told that, oh, I don't have time for Nobel Prize. He denied all kind of official awards. What awards will do? Because a work of art, if you are an artist, when somebody will see the smile of Mona Lisa, the heart will be healed. His mind will be healed today. In the story also, there is a wonderful story here, when actually, when a person suffers from depression, how we are going for therapies. Therapy, day 1, day 2, he has done wonderful stories. Let me not tell it, but purchase one book and read it. You will be saved from the quarreling with your wife. What I am doing now after retirement. I retired in the month of June, just debating a little bit for a while. My wife told that, why did not you construct a house before your retirement? Madan sir is there, you knows everything of mine. Nanda sir, Madan sir, they know. Immediately go and construct a house. Then I went to the contractor. That will become a source story. The contractor cheated me. And I took my scooter. Because in that road, I cannot take my car. And there I was trapped inside the mud. Then I called to my wife. My wife told, that is why I was telling you to construct a house earlier. Now you are growing old. Because when I retired, my wife suddenly felt that I became an old man. Though I don't. Till now she is telling me, why you retired? I do not know, you ask the government why I retired. You tell my father, he should have given me bath some more years later. All these things are very strange things. But then, acceptance is the best intelligence, the wonderful intelligence of a rather modern man. Accept everyone. Somebody scolds you, dislikes you, likes you. Go on writing if you want to be a writer. Some of your writings will be praised, some of your writings will be just denied. This is how, when we are talking of human creativity, these are very hard works. Yes. If you go to the language part of this book, you will find that, like brackish water in Khalaja. Brackish water in Khalaja. She had said, perhaps, because I know that I am a lover of this poetic language, because when I wrote a novel and I showed it to one of the writers of Punjab, he told that it is not a novel, it is a poetry book. Who told you to write a book? You can never write a novel. This is never actually the language of novel. Then you send one of your novel to me. You read my novel. Most of the writers, they do that. Because they are complacent that they are great, which they are not. And this is why we find that that language part in a story. There was a workshop going in Jyoti Vihar. And there were so many professors, also some professors from Utkal University was there. He said, you talked on other aspect of this story. But you know that when a writer writes, he has to just play language game. But do you know how to play language game? How to use the different aspect of language? You have to first, if you want to go to you want to be very highly analytical about the story. Whether it is in first person narrative, second person narrative, third person narrative, whether it is following the old Aristotelian dictum theory of how to interpret a story. First you have to go for exposition, climax, crisis, all this in denouement, rising action, falling action, how you build up a character. This is all nonsense, says Gerard Jennett. In modern days when we write, we go away from the form. As far as Asim sir was rightly saying that the first 14 works in this book are basically like stories. But they are narratives. Kalijai is a story. Then Sari is a story. Because when you are writing a story, you create a single effect or a single mood. जब हम कभी कोई भी स्टोरी लिखते हैं तभी एम्फेसिस देते हैं ए सिंगल इफेक्ट कि उस घटना में उसका इफेक्ट क्या रहा. What is the single effect of when they return from Kalijai, when the girl is drowned, they are in a trauma, as Asim sir told, and till they return to Barkul, there was, when they got down from the boat, there was a sense of relief. And most of our stories has wonderful. By reading your story, we do not go to where for treatment, being depressed. Because we are so much depressed in modern days, inside family and everything. Middle class people, teacher family. So we are not actually, we face crisis. Each moment we enjoy the pains and the joys of life. And in this, a sari becomes very important. Why the title is Kalijai? Why the title is sari? Why the title is a call from the son living in America? That single call changes the life of the mother and the father. That is how the writer, or whenever you are writing a story has its own form and structure for creating a sense of an unexpected end. Asim sir told this, that you are surprised that why this story did not linger much. So this is how, when we read a book, particularly when I am not a critic actually, basically I love writing poetry. I have got some reviews sent to people because they wanted, that I have done. But I enjoy the write. If you give me a book, I will rather more enjoy it. I will see the writer. I will just had a vision of Deepti Paiker, because in one of the story, the character says, the husband says, today you complete another story. So it is not like today you cook dal, curry. This is not like. It doesn't come to any writer of the wife until and unless you are overpowered, until and unless you are highly disturbed or you are overjoyed. Feelings won't come out. It must come out like a stream oozing out from the mountain cliff. And that sort of overpowering magical spell can only make you a writer. Very recently I was telling in one gathering, I was just giving a talk in a college, motivational talk. A student and they will never be motivated, I know, after 35 years. But then they wanted me to give a deliberation like that. I told that when you look at the world, you feel that people are abnormality. And if you don't have some kind of abnormalities in you, that abnormal is not to do your work and to look at others' works. This is one of the abnormal things. That when you write a story, you definitely search for the life of somebody else. Or what you have seen in your life, what you have experienced in your life. That happens to you. So thereby, some kind of the poet, the lover and the lunatic, some kind of deviation from the ordinary life, as the title of the book is, Extraordinary Moments in Ordinary Life. This littleness makes somebody great. Once you feel that you are little, there is a possibility of being great. Once you feel that you are full, you are gone. Once you feel that you have achieved, you are not going to achieve. So you must feel this littleness, and you must have the eye of a God. In the poem Mirror, Sylvia Plath says, the little eye of a God. You must have the little eyes of the God to look at the world and to look at the people and to look at what is happening around you. Just look around you. Charles Darwin told, it would take millions of years to understand what is around you. Your neighbor is sufficient enough to write a novel. What happens to your neighbor? So thereby, as far as now, I must go very quickly without talking at random here and there. I must say that this title of the book is, now I am doing somewhat mechanical work. So you know that the title of the book is Story at My Doorstep. Now, when we look at the title of the story book, this is said that Story at My Doorstep. This is what I was telling. Just look around. Look at your mother. How much of pain she has taken. As actually she explains, she has understood her mother-in-law and her mother, her surrounding. Has a very profound understanding of your own people. If you do not understand your mother, you cannot explain your mother. And that is why the very title is Stories at My Doorstep. What happened to her? To her feelings, emotion, what crisis have come from this little surrounding of a husband and a wife, children, people in your state, and people where in you are living. Those common incidents and events of life have been weaved into these stories and narratives. Then you need not actually go to a world of a fictitious world. Because today we must write literature in a specific cultural, social context. Gone are those days when literature was highly fictitious, excepting the science fiction today. And today we are focusing on, concentrating on a kind of literature that must bear a social and cultural relevance. Without a social and cultural relevance, literature has nothing to do with the society. So here we find that this title of this book, very quickly I am summing up, the title of the book is Stories at My Doorstep, and it very much indicates that these are the incidents and events that have happened at her doorstep. At her doorstep. So when we are looking at the 21 pieces of writing in this book, we find that some are narratives and some are stories. Some writings are narratives. They are not stories at all, because they do not have they might be appearing like stories. But these are narrations, because a narrative is also a kind of story. When you see what are the narratives, There are 4-5 kinds of narratives. And a narrative is a kind of story. A narrative is not actually something like,
45 minutes class.
but in those days, in the days of Joseph Edison, you find the narratives, those were published in Spectators by and Tatler. In those days, you find narratives were different. But these days, narratives are used also almost like a story. And there you find that today, we find that these narratives are basically, they don't have all the elements of the story, because these are not created out of from a fictitious mind, but these are actually the depiction of the real things that has happened in the life of the writer. So we find that these are narrative essays. These are narrative essays. She also writes essays. She rightfully writes the word essays. She is living in USA and she has done also workshop there. And she knows that these are actually essays, because they don't have, when you read the essays, narratives and the stories, there you find you differentiate. If it comes to your mind, why these 14 are narratives and why the 7 are stories, then you will know that after reading these 14 narratives, you find that this is the difference of a story and a narrative. Of course, I marveled with one of your stories that actually I enjoy like anything, and that is really a very realistic context of our life. People do. That story is reality. What happens to a girl who is 28 and is not yet married in Odisha? And what happens to the very surrounding? How the mother, she calls the uncle who is staying in Dwarika, and he is a professor in Hindi language and literature, also an astrologer. I am also an astrologer. Most of the teachers do that because they get time to read other things. So there was a time when I was reading occultism, astrology, because I found that my students are not ready to listen English literature. So I had other vocations. So there actually you find that when you are writing a narrative essay, it includes all the elements of a story, but then it only stems from a lived experience of the person. There it differentiates. And the first narrative, I will just telling about some of our writings without gossiping. A gift from America. This is the first narrative of this book. A gift from America is perhaps about her husband. Kuna is a character. And some relatives from United States of America, they come to Bhubaneswar. However, if you read this book, I have also stayed for 10 years in Bhubaneswar. I was staying here. Very recently I have left. And I will also come back, I think. So there you find, in 1960s, how was Bhubaneswar? It is very difficult on that part to have a picture of Bhubaneswar, how it was Unit 4. I was staying there. You are talking of that high school, Unit 4 high school. So I have seen that, but Kuna goes there to read. So if you go the first to read this book, in your leisure time, you will find how was Bhubaneswar in 1960s there. This Bhubaneswar is not there, as I read. I do not know actually. But I found almost it was a kind of a village atmosphere that Kuna plays with the fireplace, butterflies. There were, when it was surrounded with the trees, and this kind of this modern architecture was, buildings were not there. So Kuna is, and how actually Kuna's mother, I'm summing up. How Pune's mother, she goes by side is 1 rupee. It is very interesting. 1 rupee at the time in 1960s. And how actually they take, what kind of sweets they take at that time. So you can have a complete perception or when you look back, Bhubaneswar of 1960s, you can get a very graphic and pictorial picture in your mind and the way of life and how was life. That's very interesting. Anyhow, in the story, the very positive and optimistic view that Una might be her husband. Now, he was actually struggling for a gift from America. Now he is in America. This is the irony. But irony is a past thing. That you never thought of, Kuna never thought of going to the United States of America. But it so happened that he is now settled in America. This is what you believe that doesn't happen. What you don't believe that always happens in our life. That's the irony. And another story is just winding up, a wedding and the ghost. In the story you find that I was also going through some of the ghost stories of your, you have taken the, what is this name? Ruskin Barnes. He has written some of the stories for children, ghost stories for children. These very, that ghosts are very much, they move in the night, they appear like these, the grandmother's stories. You know that many oral stories. Then when they are traveling from one generation to the other generation, millions of stories are there with us in all the minds of the people. Because your grandmother, your mother have told hundreds of stories. Today we write some 21 stories. But if you remember that your mother or your grandmother might have told you 60 stories to lull you to sleep at an age. That when you don't get sleep. They were great storytellers. So this is about a ghost. When actually in 2015 they go to Bhadrak to attend a marriage party. At that time they stay in a guest house, and in the guest house there is a man called Raju, and Raju they feel actually at the night time their bed is moving, some ghost is there moving there, but it may be psychological. Because I remember that when my leg was broken, I underwent depression. And I felt that this whole building is moving. When I went to the bathroom, I felt that. I told my wife, this bathroom is moving. It happens, some very kind of uncanny things that happens in your mind. So they felt that somebody is moving the beds at the night time. And Raju in the morning comes and tells, oh, she had come. This is a ghost had come. Because the girl was poisoned and she had died there in the guest house. And they have all these traumatic experiences of spending the night in the guest house because the power goes out. And in the morning, Raju comes and tells it, oh, she had come. No, she died here in the guest house. It's poisoned. And she died here in the guest house. This is what. Another narrative is God's own food on a birthday menu. These days you don't find very good books and this narrative writing. I'm very thankful to you. People, they don't go for narrative writing. I'm very thankful to you that after such a very long time, we were teaching the narratives of Joseph Edison and all these people of 18th century. But then I enjoyed this. God's own food on a birthday menu. This is like, this is about bringing Jagannath Prasad Bhoga from Puri and how people, they don't want Bhoga these days. They want some very fast food, chicken pakoda, fish pakoda, very beautifully written. chicken pakoda, fish pakoda, people they want this. And finally the rice is not eaten by some people, many people. They left by seeing this. And how they went to a slum area and they distributed the food. That's a very lived experience of the present day life. Then you have, just a minute, we have this, my most liking narrative is Mothers from the Two States. I was telling you about this, that here we find in 2010, there was the narrator's father and father-in-law passed away. Father and father-in-law. So means that she has to manage two widows, means mother and mother-in-law. And now actually how it is difficult to manage two women, that too in New Jersey. I remember in one context he has written, and her bow and mother-in-law, she works on the bank of Hudson River. In the month of April, in the spring season, you find the blooming of roses and other flowers here. So it feels like plucking, but you cannot pluck a flower in United States of America because flowers are not meant for God there. That sentence is there. Very, very nicely written. But whereas Bo plants the flower in our backyard, because flowers are meant for gods and goddesses in India. This is a very, very rather moving few lines of this Mothers from the Two Tales. Then snowy days, so during the time of pandemic, this is how is the streets of New Jersey, how snowy, these are there. And coming to the last section, stories, just 5 minutes, within 5 minutes. Asim sir has already told about Kalijai. I have nothing to say. People tree. I will also tell you that this is the story of a girl. Now from the expression of the lived experiences, now she comes to our fictional world. Just weaving a story. Just making a story. And the most interesting thing is that the story begins with a line, it is not important for a girl to be beautiful. भारत में या उड़ीसा में कोई लड़की सुंदरी है ऐसा कोई इसका महत्व ज्यादा नहीं रखता है. क्या महत्व रखता है? It is not important for a girl to be beautiful, rather she must possess a winsome destiny. How is your destiny? This is about the problems that Veena, a 58 years old lady, faces for the marriage of Revati, who is also 28 years old. And they call their uncle Ramakrishna, who is a professor in Hindi literature and astrology. He says that this is because of Rahu, Ketu, Shani, all these grahas, that our Revati is not able to marry. So what to be done? Now she has to do a ritual. What kind of ritual? Then she has to go to a people tree and there she has to take a bowl and she has to put water there. But it was really very, you see, if a boy goes, it doesn't matter. But when a girl goes, there will be so many eyes, you know, particularly in a country, orthodox country like India, people will peep through their windows. Where is the girl going? What she is doing? This is how actually Revati is not interested and doesn't believe in these things. But then Revati has to do it. Then there is a wonderful description of the people tree. Really, I was very happy that how it is the abode of the birds. How the minas and other birds, they come there. They find a new kind of creature coming under the tree, a human. And you know that the tree is the place where the tree is, that is very dirty. That is not a place to worship God. Because we are in the habit of worshipping God in a very neat and clean place. Then he manages. But one day it so happens that they wanted to cut down the tree. Why? Because they want to expand the road. This is how Revati has developed a kind of wonderful love for this tree. There is now a bond between the tree and the garden. This is very, very powerful. Now Revati has fallen in love with this tree and she doesn't want that this tree should be cut down. And it so happens that she takes all efforts and however she is able to